And we're going to review very quickly the stem of the vascular plant. We want to make sure we remember that the reason why our stem is so important, the reason why our stem is so important is because it stores food and water, and it carries food and water throughout the plant. So when we learned about that, we learned about two different highways that carry these things. In your notes, if you don't have this picture already, I would suggest that you get it. If we did a cross section, a cut open of our stem, we would find that there are two different highways going inside of that stem. We have our xylem traveling north from the roots. Please mute yourself. And we have our phloem traveling south from the leaves. Can someone unmute themselves and tell me, what does the xylem, look back at your notes, what does the xylem carry?
It carries water.
Yeah, it's going to carry water from the roots. What is this? Go ahead and mute yourself. Go ahead and mute yourself. What is the job of the roots? Now you can unmute. What is the job of our roots?
It absorbs water.
Yeah. So it would make sense then for the water to travel from the roots to the rest of the plant. Okay. So when we're looking here at our xylem, remember it starts with an X, Y, we wanted to make sure that that's what we remembered. Today, what we're going to be looking at as well are vascular bundles. Okay. If you don't have this in your notes, I think our second period lesson was cut short on Thursday. So if you don't have this in your notes for second period, take some time to get this. We want to remember that a vascular bundle, that word vascular means veins. So I can see my veins here in my arm. It's important for us to know that plants have veins as well. That xylem and phloem, those are the veins of our plant. Today, when we're looking at our celery, we're going to find, please draw this picture and label it, just like you see Miss Neville doing. Today, when we look at our celery, we're going to be able to locate our vascular bundles. In other words, we're going to be able to clearly see, and if we can't clearly see it, I'll try to point to it with it for you. We're going to be able to clearly see each of the xylem, each of those xylem there, okay? When we're looking at the celery, the question I want us to work to answer is, based on what we see, is celery vascular, please write this down, or non-vascular? Now, before we can answer that question, let's look at how we can find that out. Our vascular bundles help to inform us whether a plant is vascular, that means very well developed, or non-vascular, that means very poorly developed, based on how the xylem and phloem are organized. In a vascular plant, the xylem and phloem appear in an organized way. So you're going to be able to see a pattern. They're going to be in a nice, pretty line when you're looking inside the stem. But with a piece of moss, which is a non-vascular plant, if I were to look at that under a microscope, I would be able to see that the xylem and phloem are all over the place. They're very unorganized. So as we look inside the celery stem today, I want you to try to answer that question. Is celery vascular or non-vascular, and why? That's actually going to be the checking for understanding question that you'll be completing today once we get done with our live lesson. It's going to be due by tomorrow morning, and it's going to be an extended response where you're able to explain to me, yes or no, the celery is vascular or non-vascular, and why. Remember, this lesson is being recorded. So if you don't remember how to tell the difference from a vascular and non-vascular plant by looking at its stem, go back and rewind this lesson so that you can hear it and it can help to inform you in answering your question today for your CFU. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. Ms. Neville's going to stop sharing this screen. Remember, if you didn't get these notes, this lesson is being recorded. Okay, and I'm now going to plug up my document camera. And so let's look here at a piece of celery. Okay. Now, inside our celery today, we're going to be looking at two different things here. There we go. Okay, let's do it this way. One second here. Let's get this camera rolling. Here we go. All right. So we have our pieces of celery here. Miss Neville's going to put on her gloves. And I'm using a butter knife today, not a scalpel, because celery isn't nearly as hard to cut, as difficult to cut as that segmented worm with its tender skin was. So let's go ahead and take a look here at some celery. Miss Neville's already done the job of pre-cutting some things because I wanted you to be able to look at some things. So we cut you guys can see, we cut a leafy piece of celery here, okay, because we're going to be looking at the vascular bundles inside of that leaf. I also cut a piece of the stalk or our stem here, and I'm going to cut a little bit more of it.
So your screen, Miss Neville. We can't see your screen.
Oh, goodness. Sorry. Thank you for letting me know.
You're welcome.
Okay, can you see my screen now, Peyton? Okay, so hopefully, Naomi, can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when we're looking here at our celery stalk, I'm going to do something and cut off a little piece of it. I didn't wash the celery, so you'll see all the soil and stuff in it. Your mom and dad usually wash it before you eat it. So any of the black specks you see there's just because Ms. Neville didn't wash the celery stalk. So when we're looking here at our celery stalk, we see this is the actual stem, and these ridges that you see here, I bet you never paid attention to. they're extremely important. This is actually showing you each of the bundles, each of the xylem and phloem, each of those ridges is a piece of the xylem, the highway there or the phloem, okay? So when we're looking here, remember we drew that picture of the cross section of it? Look closely here. Yeah. Do you see, and I'll show you with my pencil, do you see those little bitty dots there? And they are happening in a little row. Yeah, go ahead and draw those dots. I'm going to cut this in half so maybe you can see a little clearer. Focus, focus. There we go. So you should see those little dots there. And those little dots show you each of those green dots is the xylem. Those are the highways that carry water throughout the plant. Okay, notice how organized they are. They're in a nice little pattern there. That's super important to look at and remember. Now, the phloem is going to be the white tissue, the white flesh that you see inside of the celery. So when we're looking here at our phloem, what we're going to see here, this is what carries the sugar or the food throughout the plant. So the question becomes, am I going to be able to see those same little dots up towards the top of the celery where my leafy part is? Let's see. I'm going to cut this down a little bit more. Some of the leaves came off, but that's all right. Let's let that focus up. And what you're going to find here, focus up, come on. Okay, what you're going to find here is you don't see many of those dark green dots there. You see a lot of white flesh. There's a reason for that, babies. The reason why is because food is created at the plants through photosynthesis. Food is made in the leaves, okay? So the leaves are going to have a lot more of the phloem highways where sugar is carried than xylem. Now, it's still going to have some water going to those leaves. It's still going to have some of the xylem, but not nearly as many as we see in our stem. There we go. Okay, not nearly as many as we see in our stem. What I want to do now, let's remove some of my pieces here. What I want to do now is do a cross section of our celery. I now want to do a cross section of our celery, where I'm going to cut it right down the middle. Okay, and what you'll see here is all of those lines, all of those dots, each of those dots represents a tube. We got a good one here. You have to look closely. You see that dark green tube right there? It's a dark green line. That's a xylem that I've cut in half. If I was very crafty, I would be able to pick out and completely dig out that xylem, and it would come out as a tube. Because it shows you that it's little bitty tiny tubes. It's little bitty tiny tubes that are carrying water throughout that plant. Okay. So when we're looking here, we're going to see those tiny tubes there. And I'm not as crafty at it as my other sixth graders. What you'll be able to see is you can pick out those little tubes using your fingers or a butter knife with the under the supervision of an adult. You want to be able, you could pick out that tube and it would come out as a long string. And that string is actually would look like a little straw because it carries water throughout our plant. So when you're asking yourself, we'll go back to our big stalk here. When we're asking ourselves, is the vascular plant, very good, is the vascular plant, or is the celery, I kind of just gave you the answer, is the celery a vascular or non-vascular plant? The answer here would lie in how that xylem and phloem are so neatly organized. Yeah, you see how they occur in a nice little row here of dark green circles? Yeah. So this clearly tells us that the celery is vascular. This is a vascular plant because the xylem and phloem are organized in a neat pattern. Okay? So when we're doing our assignment for today,
You're muted, Miss Neville. Yeah, you're muted.
I'm unmuted, I'm sorry. When we're doing our assignment for today, it's important for us to remember that the celery plant is a vascular plant because the xylem and phloem are so neatly organized, okay? You're going to be answering that question today. I'm about to release it to you in your pink folder. We're going to be using that pink folder for another week. Okay, and as you're working on that assignment, remember, all sentences begin with a capital letter, they end with a period, okay, and you want to make sure you try to restate the question when you answer it. As always, you'll have 2 attempts, and if you have any questions for Miss Neville, please email me. I'm going to be available by email for the rest of the day. Have an amazing day, guys. Bye.
Bye. Bye.